Hello and welcome to Volume 102 of Capital Ideas Live. In today's issue, we'll discuss Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring. We'll walk up to the edge of the fiscal cliff. We'll talk about how federal funds are available for roads and bridges in Alabama, and we'll see what's going on with timber prices. I'm Hayes Brown, the General Counsel of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, and I'll be your host for today's discussion. $1 billion is a lot of money, or at least it used to be, but it doesn't come to you. You have to take a trip. And for some, a trip begins by getting on a ramp. And if you don't understand this, John Cooper, Director of ALDOT, will make it all clear. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
John, could you provide a brief overview of Governor Bentley's A-Trip initiative in which local governments can participate?
I can. In summary, it's a program that the governor originated this past year that is dedicated to the proposition of committing $1 billion of federal transportation funding that otherwise would be used on state and federal roads in our state to county and city roads and streets and bridges. And the program is designed to roll out over a 3-year period of time with the goal of investing $1 billion of federal money over that period of time in road and bridge projects in Alabama, projects that would be owned and directed by counties and cities across the state in cooperation with ALDOT.
Okay. What's the primary obstacle that some governments have in getting A-Trip participation?
Well, there's a lot of work that has to be done, plans that have to be drawn and specifications made and so forth, but clearly the biggest problem that most folks have is the 20% match requirement, meaning that for each $4 of federal money that is made available, $1 of local matching funds has to be found, and a lot of cities and counties have difficulty doing that.
Okay. Do you have a program to deal with that issue? What's a brief overview of that?
Well, we are rolling out a program, and you, of course, made reference to the two programs. A TRIP, or A-Trip, as many people in Alabama say it, is the broad general program, and then the RAMP program, which is the Rural Assistance Match Program, we are in the process of rolling out now to the counties and cities across the state. In broad terms, that program will give a county, as a county unit, the cities within the county would have to operate within the overall county unit for this purpose, but it gives the county the opportunity to elect to accept $1 million of state-provided match money, which would allow that county, including the cities in the county, to have a $5 million road program in the county that would be financed by some combination of state and federal funds. That program would be directed to fixing school bus deficient bridges, streets, and roads that the county would choose. And if the county elects to accept that, that would cap their participation at $5 million plus anything that was granted to the county during round one, or if less than $2 million was granted during round one, the county could provide its own matching money and have additional projects up to $2 million. So that would tell every county that you could have a program of at least $7 million with matching funds only on $2 million. Okay.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate that and appreciate your interest in these roads and bridges that are important to the timber industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've all been hearing about the fiscal cliff. That's the expiration of the Bush tax cuts. But what's really at stake? Pat Raffanello keeps up with these things. Hello, Pat.
Hey, how are you this morning?
We hear about the fiscal cliff. Tell me, what are these guys in Washington doing?
Well, if you listen to the media, you're aware of the fact that come January 1, without congressional action, all of the current tax rates that have been in place for the last 12 years expire and will go back up. On my slides that are available to our audience, the first slide gives you details of what exactly those tax rate increases would be. And I think for forest landowners, a couple of key ones are what happens to the estate tax. The estate tax would snap back to the $1 million exemption and a 55% maximum rate. Capital gains rates go from the current 15% to 20% January 1. In addition, as a result of Obamacare, there is a 3.8% additional tax on investment income. So January 1, absent action by Congress, capital gains rates will go to nearly 24%, and personal income maximum rates will go from 35% to 39.6%.
Okay, why don't we go over that again? Let's take them each one by one. Let's start with the estate tax rates and exclusions. You've already mentioned that, but go over that one more time for us.
Well, as part of the 2001 Bush tax cuts, there was a phase down of the estate tax, taking it from the 55% rate with $1 million exemption to actually zero in year 10. It went down over 10 years. So in 2010, if you were fortunate enough to die in that year, you got to pass your estate for free. The financial advisors called it a once-in-a-lifetime planning opportunity. Not many people volunteered for it, but it could have happened.
Okay, good. So $5 million and 35% is the current thing.
That is correct.
Well, let's talk about capital gains, because that's timber sale income often falls in that category. What's going on with that?
Yes, it does. Capital gains and dividends income have been taxed at 15% since 2001. But that law expires December 31st. The rate of capital gains will revert from 15% to 20% on January 1. And in addition, on January 1 of 2013, an additional 3.8% tax on investment income goes into effect to fund Obamacare. So obviously, if you are considering selling an asset, a capital asset, there's an incentive to get that done before December 31st of this year.
All right. Well, thank you, Pat. We appreciate that very much. Andy Morris is a law professor at University of Alabama, and he's co-edited a book exploring the historical context of Rachel Carson's book called Silent Spring. It's a very influential book written 50 years ago, which gave rise to the modern environmental movement. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks for having me.
Why is Silent Spring still important today?
Well, it's really the foundation of the modern environmental movement. You can see all the themes that groups like the Sierra Club talk about today, and so it's an important book for understanding where they're coming from and where they want to go.
Okay, some of the contributors to your book are critical of certain assumptions and conclusions that Ms. Carson drew in writing Silent Spring. What are some of the bigger problems with her book?
Well, the book was written as a work of advocacy. She was explicitly encouraged by Wallace Shawn, the editor of The New Yorker, to write an attack on the use of pesticides and herbicides in particular, and she set out to do that. She'd planned to do that from the mid-1940s when she first pitched the idea to Reader's Digest. And she had built up an incredible amount of credibility as a writer before Silent Spring came out with some very fact-based books about the ocean that were very popular, were Reader's Digest and Book of the Month selections and so forth. And so when she came out with this work of advocacy, she neglected or deliberately really chose not to present a balanced portrayal of the use of pesticides, but instead to focus on a few points that she felt were critical. And she sort of started the whole, or picked up on the whole idea that we were poisoning ourselves through the use of chemicals. And in doing that, she neglected a lot of things. For one, she paid no attention to the role tobacco use plays in cancer rates. And so her cancer numbers, which scared the daylights out of me when I was a 12-year-old reading this book, are really just complete garbage because she's not looking at other factors. In addition, she really did not make any effort to take into account the benefits of pesticide use. So she focused solely on the criticism of it, and that has led, unfortunately, to a virtual ban on DDT use throughout the world, and DDT is an incredibly important tool in fighting malaria. And as a result, millions of people have died, really directly as a result of her book.
Well, are there any things that you feel like she got right in the book?
She was very good on a couple of points. One, she's a wonderful writer, and that's one of the reasons the book was so successful. But what she really got right was that USDA was pumping a lot of money into mass spraying programs around the United States that made little or no economic sense, which is why USDA was doing it rather than private landowners, including gypsy moth eradication efforts on Long Island, and in the South, aerial dispersal of fire ant poisons that state governments in the Southeast, for example, refused to fund themselves because landowners didn't like them. So she correctly criticized the sort of the federal government's subsidization of these sort of mass eradication programs that made no economic sense.
Okay. Well, thanks, Andy. We appreciate that overview, your book. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
For those of you who want to plant longleaf, you normally use containerized seedlings, but some have observed that after a windstorm, these new seedlings topple, that is, they fall over. Dr. Dave Haywood and others believe that they have found a solution. Hello, Dave.
Yes.
Dave, you're advocating applying copper to the cavity wall of these containers before they're filled with the growing medium and implanted with the longleaf seedlings. Can you tell us why?
Yes. Copper treatments to the cavity wall of a container cell blunts the root ends, so the roots will not grow down the cavity wall, and this results in more roots growing out of the plug into the upper surface soil where nutrients are more available. This better pattern of root growth versus one where roots grow down along the cavity wall results in larger trees years after planting. The drawback is that the plug is softer and more trouble to plant if copper is used. The compromise solution is to treat only a portion of the cavity wall with copper and let some roots grow downward, thus providing a stiffer, more plantable plug.
Okay. Does container size matter when choosing to grow seedlings in a small versus large container cavity?
Yes. Larger seedlings have larger tap roots, which are the roots that sink deep into the soil and provide anchorage. A larger taproot also has more food reserves and larger diameter lateral roots. Thus, these seedlings are more competitive and will initiate height growth sooner than small seedlings will, and they will be larger trees at a given age than will small seedlings. Now, for clarity, the standard container-grown longleaf pine seedling has a 6 cubic inch root plug, and this is a good size to use, especially if the cavity was treated with copper. You can plant a seedling with a larger root plug than 6 cubic inches, and this may boost growth, but it will cost more to do so.
Okay. You've kind of alluded to this, but connect the dots for me now about how copper and container size influences this toppling phenomenon.
We do not know right now if either copper or container size affects toppling. Susanna Sung, Marianne Sayer, I, and our research team are just beginning to mechanically pull over longleaf trees to measure the forces required to uproot them. It appears that a good deep sinking taproot is needed for stability, but that feature is less affected by copper than are the lateral roots. A larger container-grown seedling has a larger taproot than a small container seedling. But is this still a factor at older ages because a tree with a large crown catches more wind and may be easier to topple? We don't know right now what most influences toppling.
All right. Well, appreciate you looking into it for us, and that's been some interesting research that you've been working on. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, promoting desirable tree growth by using herbicides is now a common practice. Michelle Eisenberg is a well-known expert in the field, so we wanted to check in with her and get a refresher course. Hello, Michelle.
Hey, Hayes, how are you?
Tell us what herbicides are predominantly used in forestry applications and at what stage these herbicides are applied.
Sure. We have a lot of the same chemistries that we've had in the past with some new ones that have been introduced, but primarily landowners are still utilizing them for site prep. And the suite of herbicides that we're using is Arsenal, Accord, which is glyphosate, better known as Roundup, if you're not familiar with glyphosate, Garlon, as well as Oust Extra, which is something kind of new. If a landowner waits till later in the season, mid-August or into September to site prep, they can put Oust Extra into the tank mix to provide herbaceous weed control into the following year. And that is something that started mainly with the larger companies that caught on with landowners. As well, I was going to mention Milestone was introduced by Dow and has become a wonderful chemistry should landowners have liling pines on their site after it's been clear cut. You know, the little bitty ones that pop up that can become a very big problem after they've planted. And so that's a new chemistry that we're using in forestry that is showing some really great results.
So that will actually eliminate the volunteer pine seedlings that you actually don't want. You'll have too many if you don't.
Exactly, yeah. And that is something that can be missed on site prep prescriptions when you go out and look at a site. If it's been cut real clean, you have to really get down underneath the hardwoods and look basically just a couple inches above the dirt for this. It will look like a mat of seedlings. And in the past, we've used really high rates of Accord to control it with iffy results. But Dow has this new chemistry, as I mentioned, Milestone, that's really controlling the seedlings the way we need it to be done. So that's been a bonus.
So Milestone and Oust Extra are some new ones. Tell us the common ways that landowners typically use herbicides. You've mentioned site prep.
Right.
Tell us about that, and are there other reasons to use them?
Sure, absolutely. Site prep is the most common one, of course, after the clear cut. Another way is if a landowner chooses not to site prep due to the cost, they can look at a burn, plant, and release. So you'd be looking at the first couple of years after the trees have been planted to go in and do what we call a release. You're releasing the seedlings from the hardwood competition using Arsenal, using Escort. As well, this past year in Georgia, they had a cost share program for landowners where they could do mid-rotation release to their stands. And that's where you're going over a mature timber stand and releasing the pine trees from the competition as well, which is a really great bonus for landowners to have the state cost share that program for them. So those are predominantly the main uses: site prep release, mid-rotation release, as well as we never want to overlook invasive control of Kogan grass, kudzu, privet. And especially with privet, I wanted to highlight that there are winter treatments where you can go right over the top of hardwoods using a cord to control privet, and that is something that has been kind of a new use for that product over the past couple of years. So those are the main uses for herbicides, and landowners continue to be on board with the use of them and continue to see how it benefits their stands, and they are continuing to embrace them, which is wonderful for all of us.
All right. Well, thank you, Michelle. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Frankie Kennedy is a surveyor, and surveying is often necessary to define property lines and mark the location of certain objects. So we wanted to see what Mr. Kennedy was up to, so we invited him on Capital Ideas Live. Hello, Mr. Kennedy.
Hello.
What kind of problems are you being asked to solve for landowners?
The problems arise from like adverse possession. You really need to maintain your property lines, so especially with large landowners, because you need to investigate and protect your property lines over the years, because people can take it from you. And
you may have a deed to a property, but someone else has not observed that definition and have actually taken it over, right? Usually a next door neighbor.
Exactly. Like, for instance, they will cut an extra lawnmower blade wide around their property. I have one case, I drive by maybe once a month. I surveyed probably 10 years ago, and now this 1 acre out of this large parcel of property has about an extra 50 feet all the way around their property.
Okay. All right. So, what changes have occurred in the surveying industry over the last 30 years or so?
It's mostly the equipment that we use. When I started, we used a transit and a chain or measuring tape and plumb bob, and you would have to have direct line of sight to use that equipment. We have GPS equipment now that, of course, uses satellites, and you can just go from point to point without having a line of sight.
Mm-hmm. How has this been a plus to your business?
It used to take 4 people to do what, in most cases, our crews can do with 1 person now. It helps our business. We can do it more efficiently, faster, and it helps the client.
Okay. Good. Well, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We appreciate you joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You may be accustomed to thinking about pulpwood and saw timber, but you're missing an opportunity if you don't also think about poles, that is power poles. David Stone can tell us about it. Hello, David.
Good morning.
Tell us about the value of a pole, that's a power pole, compared to, say, a saw log of the same size and age.
In almost all cases, you're at least looking at twice the value for the same stem. If it has pole characteristics, you can double your money.
Okay, and certainly not something to overlook then. What do you think when you're looking at a tree, what are the aspects that you are looking at that identifies a tree as a pole as opposed to a saw log?
We have to look at the entire tree as one entity instead of where you can break a saw log tree into different logs. We have to have the entire tree needs to be straight. It needs to be well pruned. There's a ratio of diameter and height that you have to look at. You have to have good limb angles, small limbs, and you need certain ring counts. You need good density in a pole. So we have to look at the entire tree, everything that we think about for genetically improved trees, and to some extent is what it takes to grow a pole.
Okay. And what is it that makes these trees behave this way? In other words, is this just a freak of nature, or is this something that people can do to try to promote this type growth?
To some extent, I guess you could say it is a characteristic of the tree and genetics and nature. But what you do in almost all instances is you select your best candidates that can be poles. You have to resist the urge to grow diameter at all costs. So low-intensity plantings don't work real well. Thinning early at age 12 when all you're doing is promoting diameter growth, but you don't get good pruning and you decrease your density doesn't really help. In all cases of management, whoever does the first thinning, the quality of that thinning determines what you get. So I would recommend maybe delaying the thinning to somewhere in the 50 to 20 year range instead of, there has been a propensity to try to thin young just to get diameter growth. You've got to get some height growth, some competition, and some pruning. Probably the most critical decision would be made if the first thinning is done well, would be your second thinning. There will be trees that are straight, that show good growth, not necessarily dominance, but good co-dominance, that are well pruned, have good limb angles, are straight, they're not forked, they don't have cat faces. Quite a few of the larger timber companies are now, before they make the second thinning, they're going out and identifying their pole candidates to try to save them from that, from being harvested in the second thinning. So that more than anything else seems to be the best thing a manager can do. Not so much try to force a tree to be a pole, is select the candidates you have and grow those and favor those candidates over the others.
Mm-hmm. As you're looking at poles in your experience, do you find these more often in just natural stands, or are you finding them in pine plantations?
We are finding most of them in plantations now, and that's more a nature of the industry. if the whole world was Longleaf, would be little selection involved, and they probably wouldn't need me. But as we continue to to exist as a pole company, we realize we got to deal with plantation, and loblolly will make a good pole. It's just over the years the poles came out of the Longleaf slash country, but as we go forward, we're going to have to adapt and use the genetically improved loblolly.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, David. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
In our markets chair is Sarah Baldwin. I wanted to get you to talk about these related markets, the markets related to housing, lumber, pulp and paper, and biomass. What's been going on in those markets lately?
Well, it's mostly a tale of two major markets, the building construction, mostly residential market that's been pretty weak, and then the paperboard, and end products market that's been changing. Biomass is still small, still developing, and hurt by the low cost of natural gas. But biomass can still affect pulpwood demand in some markets. The housing that drives lumber and panels, new residential housing construction has been weak since 2006, but there is a little light now. Sales are up, months of supply are down, and houses still take longer to sell than in 2004, but that length of time to sell is coming down.
Let me ask you this about the housing market. Do you have a baseline number of housing starts per year that we can kind of look to as we read the paper to find, this is more of a normal, sustainable type housing start number per year?
I don't. I used to say 1 million was it, but it ain't it. Nowadays we're looking at progressive improvement, and also we're looking at that existing home market, trying to find out whether those are going to be removed and new houses put in there. Home improvement has become a big part of what the building construction does, and going forward, it will probably be something to watch.
So you suspect it may be under 1 million. Is that where you're going with it?
I'm saying that sustainable is a terrible word to use in this case. Mm-hmm. And keeping an eye on the total housing demand, and also keeping an eye on rebuilding, like after Storm Sandy or after that the terrible tornadoes that they had in the Midwest.
Okay. Well, we've talked about these big markets of housing, lumber, and biomass and so forth, but how do these things affect the timber market directly?
Well, directly, you have a weak saw timber market because of the weak housing and lumber markets. But lumber markets are up now. Maybe we do have slightly higher saw timber prices, but they're still at historically low levels. The other side of that coin is now 60% of the wood, the pine in Alabama and across the South, is going to pulpwood, and that's the big market.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Sarah. We appreciate that for joining us again. And that's all the time we have for this issue. Our thanks go to John Cooper, Pat Raffanello, Andy Morris, and Dave Haywood. And we also appreciate the contributions of Michelle Eisenberg, Frankie Kennedy, David Stone, and Sarah Baldwin. 150 years ago, you would have been concerned about energy policy because whales were being hunted to extinction, and then oil was discovered in large quantities in Pennsylvania. 100 years ago, you would have been concerned about the timber supply because lots of land was being cleared for agriculture. Then the internal combustion engine replaced the horse as the main mode of travel. And today, billions of cubic feet of natural gas is being made available due to new drilling technologies. Just when scarcity raises its sword, innovation slaps it down with one blow. On behalf of the Alabama Forest Owners Association, I'm Hayes Brown, thanking you for joining us for this issue of Capital Ideas Live.